January is Tamil Heritage Month in Canada. This year's celebrations also mark almost 10 years since the end of Sri Lanka's devastating civil war. For Tamils, that conflict is often the lens through which identity and heritage are viewed. But that may not offer a wide enough view. So, here for a broader perspective, we welcome Roshani Vignaraja, an Ontario public servant and chair of the nonpartisan network Tamils in Public Service. Melia Wilson, former Assistant Deputy Attorney General in Ontario, now a partner at Nava Wilson LLP. And Kumaran Nadesan, 2018 Civic Action Diverse City Fellow and founding chair of Conduit, a network that does international development work in the traditional Tamil homelands in Sri Lanka. And we are delighted to welcome the three of you here to TVO tonight for a conversation that is very timely, given the month we're in. And if we could, our director, Sydney Cohen, who's sitting in for Sheldon tonight, is going to bring up this graphic so that we can bring people some of the background that they need to know as we get our conversation started. Sri Lanka, if you don't know, is an island nation located in the Indian Ocean off the east coast of India. It has a population of 22 million. The two major ethnic groups there are the Sinhalese and the Tamils. The Sri Lankan Civil War lasted 26 years, only ending in the year 2009. And according to a United Nations report, as many as 40,000 Tamil civilians may have died in the last few months of the war. January is recognized as Tamil Heritage Month in Canada. Okay, with that background into place, let's start with this. Can I start over here?
No problem.
How did you come to call Canada home?
What happened was in 1972, my family moved to Fredericton, New Brunswick.
From
Sri Lanka.
Okay.
My father had a job there, he's a professor, and my mother had a job. And so we sort of came in the fall.
Can I guess there weren't too many Tamils in New Brunswick in 1972?
There were none. There were none.
Until you arrived.
That is correct,
Yeah.
yes.
So how did that go?
You know what? It was wonderful. The moment we arrived here, and we had to move because there was in the 70s, there was majoritarianism happening all over South Asia, the leftovers of the British Empire. Mm-hmm. And for example, I wouldn't have been able to get into university because all Tamils had to score 25%, 35% more than the Sinhalese to be admitted into university. Mm-hmm. So, Tamil families began to move, we moved, and it was an amazing sense of freedom to come to Canada. I could be myself. There were wonderful people who befriended us, and there were the Montreal Canadians, who were the stars at that time.
I knew there was something about you I didn't like. There we go. Okay, we finally figured it out. Okay, well, nobody's perfect. That's okay, Melia. Let's go over here. Roshani, how did your family end up coming to Canada?
Yeah, my parents both immigrated here around the 1980s, which was a pretty peak time in terms of the flow of Tamils from Sri Lanka coming to Canada. And they actually ended up in Montreal, which is one of the first...
Don't tell me they're Canadians fans too.
I can't say for sure, no. I want to say no, especially not my mom.
Good.
But they came to Montreal, which was actually a major hub for welcoming Tamils into Canada. And they actually got married here, and so
I had you here.
Yeah, they had me in Etobicoke, my brother in Montreal, so I'm not a Montreal Canadiens fan by default.
Yay.
And so for me, Canada was really always home, and it wasn't until much later in my life, which we'll probably discuss soon enough, that I started to even really identify with being Tamil as something that is a part of calling home for me. So
we will get to that.
Yes, we will.
Yes, indeed. Kumaran, how about you? What's your background story?
So it's not very unlike what you've heard from Melia and Roshani. So there was a series of displacements that kind of moved my life around, Steve. So I left Sri Lanka when I was young because of the political displacement, because of the treatment of Tamils.
How old were you?
I was 5 at the time, and then I went to India, and then there was a sort of an economic displacement in terms of, as a refugee going to India, my mother, who was a lawyer at the time, couldn't really practice. So then we had to move from India then to the Middle East. And then the Middle East...
Where did you live in the Middle East?
In Oman, which is
okay.
a sultanate, sort of a moderate sultanate. Mm-hmm. And then there was an sort of an educational displacement in Oman, whereby expats who went into Oman couldn't go into universities. It was nationalized for the Omanis. So then that then brought us to Canada in a very long-about way. So I've been here for just over 20 years now, but had my secondary high school education and university education in Canada. So an exodus, movement, displacement, migration.
You've been all over the world.
Yeah,
You've
yeah.
experienced all of the classic things that.
Absolutely, but I think that's what's so great about Canada and Canadians. I think this is the story of all Canadians, movement.
We mentioned in the background, Malia, that there was a quarter-century-long civil war.
Yes.
In Sri Lanka, which was tragic and shocking, and I imagine there are some significant differences of opinion about why that war happened and how it started and so on. In your view, what was the cause of the war?
Well, the cause of the war was from years since after the British left. The Tamils, being the minority, have been fighting for their rights. And, there were various proposals put forward. The initial suggestion was a federalist structure, like what we have in Canada. It's power sharing, recognition of minority rights, etc. So that never happened. And from time to time, I mean, the '83 war was the biggest, but it had been building. We've been having numerous what we used to call riots.
What role did your grandfather play in all of that?
So my grandfather was the leader of the Tamils after the British left, and the leadership model then was a Gandhian model. That was what was happening in South Asia, and it was nonviolent. And they would have the protests would be satyagraha, where you'd go protest peacefully, and numerous attempts were made to bring about reconciliation and peace and equity and equality and all of those things that we have in Canada. Mm-hmm. None of that worked, which then resulted in the war in '83.
Did you appreciate the significance of your grandfather when you were living over there?
Well, I suppose I never understood how he was viewed by the Tamil population, which is now I know as a very great leader. But during the time, it was politics morning, noon, and night.
In your home?
In our home, right? We would go down, we would visit my grandparents, and everybody would sit around the big dining room table, and the talk would be politics. And I was quite young, obviously, but I would sort of listen in, so I would understand and hear what was going on. And, at times it was, you cannot understand how upsetting and hard it was to be a Tamil.
In case anybody wants to Google his name, what was his name?
Well, that's a challenge for you to pronounce it. So it's S.J.V. Chelvanayagam.
Okay, good. You, obviously, having been born here, would not have had any firsthand experience with that, but was there any conversation in the home about how the war started?
Well, I think for me, so I lived in Brampton, so the West End, and if you know about the majority of the Canadian Tamil population resides, in Scarborough and Markham, and so growing up, I didn't really have much of a Tamil influence beyond my family. So it was something that I wasn't really curious about, and it was something that wasn't actually talked about a lot in my household. My parents maybe just didn't want to talk about it. Politics wasn't something we discussed at the dinner table.
But it was the biggest thing in their lives. I mean, it's why they left.
Yeah, and I think there are different responses to that kind of experience, right? There's either you can talk about it, you can educate on it, but there's also you want to kind of block it out, and they're trying to start a new life and move on with it. So I feel like that is the approach that my parents kind of took. I mean, my father and I, we have conversations about politics a lot, mostly in the Canadian context. And when I did have questions, he would be open to answering, but it wasn't a lot about their experiences with it.
Got it.
And also on top of that, not being exposed to a lot of Tamil spaces because of where I was living and the school I went to and not being around Tamil people, it wasn't really something that came up a lot growing up.
Kumar, how about you?
I think it's been a mixture of both, Steve. I think growing up, there was no active conversation as such, around the dinner table, but it was always there in the background of our lives. I think my mother, which of being a lawyer, all these young men would come up to our house and ask for all kinds of help. And I was a young boy running around. I didn't quite get what these young men were coming into the house for, and that I understood later on. These were the early fighters looking for help, looking for money, those kinds of things. I think. For me, my identity has been shaped a lot by coming to Canada itself and meeting with the Tamil community, getting active in the community, understanding the different political sort of permutations and combinations that goes on within the community. But at home itself, it was all about sort of a pan-Tamil identity around arts, culture, religion. And I think I'm glad, because there's a danger of a single story, I think, being told about the Canadian Tamil community, and it's always seen through a political lens, which I think doesn't benefit the community a great deal. I think there's a lot more to the culture than just the politics. And I appreciate, in hindsight, having those multiple, I guess, lenses to look at community, at identity, and eventually the politics as well.
In which case, given all the different places you lived
Yeah.
before getting here, how was adjusting to life in Canada for you?
You know what? It was challenging. I don't want to sort of play the violin because I think I had a lot of privilege coming in to Canada. Like my parents were professionals. We sort of self-sponsored ourselves and so on. But I was a weird kid with a weird accent. The Tamil kids in my high school were like, "Why are you speaking in English? You're Tamil." And then white Canadians were like, "Where are you from?" Right? So I always felt kind of an outsider in that sense. But I mean, that's, I think, just generally what newcomers feel like. So my challenges weren't all that different. But I think the main thing, though, is by virtue of living in all those different places, I think that makes my sort of Canadian experience very similar to what I think it should be, where we are able to kind of like go in and out of different spaces, don different kinds of masks or whatever it may be, move through different spaces much more easily.
You are all, Roshani, to you first, you're all Tamils, you're all Sri Lankans, you're all Canadians.
Are we?
Okay, let's find out. I want to get a sense of how you all self-identify.
Yeah, I would say I'm definitely a Tamil Canadian.
Tamil Canadian.
Yes.
So when you said, "Are we?" when I said Sri Lankan, you don't necessarily identify that way.
Well, I mean, I think I may depart a little bit from my colleague Roshani's. I consider myself to be Canadian of Tamil heritage from Sri Lanka. Like all those three things, maybe not in equal parts, but they're all meaningful in some way to my identity.
Canadian of Tamil heritage from Sri Lanka.
That's right.
In that order, then. Is
Yes.
that how you see your identity? One,
Yes.
2, and 3?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, interesting. How about you, Molly?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I would say definitely Canadian. I am of Tamil heritage. I would do, they're one and the same for me. I spent some time in Sri Lanka.
That's right. You spent some time in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
So that is the least fundamental part of your identity.
That is correct.
Huh. And of course, you've been in Canada now for
Forever.
47. Well,
Yes.
not forever, but 47 years.
Yes.
Obviously, the biggest
Yeah,
chunk
it
of your
is
life.
home,
Yeah, it is home.
And it allows me to be Tamil.
Interesting. Can I got to follow up with you because
I'm
you gave a
sure
very
I
interesting
thought
answer.
you
there.
might.
Why is it that you more overwhelmingly self-identify as Canadian first, Tamil second, and Sri Lankan? It sounds like barely at all.
Well, I think all three things are important. So Canadian, I mean, I by virtue of living in different places, I never got the notion of, national borders or nationalism or patriotism for that sense. But then, Steve, I decided to travel the globe in 2014, backpacked through 30 countries, and I tell you, that was the year that changed my identity around.
How so?
When I landed in Pearson, I almost fell to the ground and kissed it. You really get an appreciation for what it means to be Canadian and Canada's standing in the world when you travel it. And just the kinds of conversations you have, the openness with which people welcome you in different parts of this world when you say you're Canadian, as opposed to American, I suppose, is just remarkable. And that's when I really felt that despite our blemishes, there are so many blemishes in terms of how we constitute ourselves and all of that, I'm still so glad that I'm a part of Canada and I get to have this identity and play and shape my view on the world through Canada's lens.
One of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation tonight is that for non-Tamil citizens in the province of Ontario, most of the time I suspect they hear the word Tamil in the news, it's in relation to some kind of political protest or something like that, some kind of political issue. And we've got a few pictures here. Go ahead. Sidney Cohen is sitting in for Sheldon Osmond this week. Why don't you bring these up? This is the stuff that people probably remember. A series of demonstrations by members of the Tamil diaspora throughout the streets of downtown Toronto. This was in 2009, bringing attention to the situation in Sri Lanka. There was a human chain along Yonge Street. And, this one may be at the top of the list.
Yeah.
We well remember when the Gardiner Expressway, the east-west thoroughfare along the lakeshore of Toronto, was closed for several hours in rush hour after, I'd say, was it hundreds? We're not going to say thousands, right? It was probably hundreds of protesters ran up the on-ramp and essentially took over the highway. Now, you were at one of those demonstrations, weren't you?
I was,
You
yeah.
were.
It was an interesting time in my life. So, like I said, I went to school. I didn't really have a lot of a Tamil community influence. And it wasn't until this moment in 2009 when there was a real call to action from all Tamil Canadians to come together for these protests that I started to really look into, what is happening back home? What is my position on it? And most importantly, what can I do right now to help? Right?
How old would you have been at the time?
I would have been in grade 11, I want to say.
Grade 11?
Yeah.
Okay, so 15, 16,
Yeah,
16, 17?
something like that. So that was really when I started to connect and really dig into what my identity was as not just a Canadian anymore. I'm a Tamil Canadian, right?
Yeah.
So
What do you think the spark was that suddenly made you get interested in that aspect of your life?
it's realizing that I'm different. There's something about me, there's something about my heritage that is different, and there's something that requires my energy, So it felt like a call to action for me. So it was something I decided to act on. Part of the reason for going was curiosity. I wanted to know, what is it that we're fighting for, or what is it that we're calling to the government for? And also, I wanted to have that sense of belonging in the Tamil community that I didn't have before. And I really felt that I found that there, and I was just so astounded by how well we were able to organize in that moment. And that's something I really give credit to the activists in our community for organizing. Activism comes in all different ways and methods, but there's a certain time for a certain thing, and you got to commend their energy and the amount of dedication that they put into that.
But it was grief, wasn't it? At 2009, when the war ended, it was, what you saw there was grieving. Because it had
tens
been
of thousands of your...
Yes.
Yeah, it was
the
and to
peak of
this
it all.
day, there is such grief in our community, and we may have lots of differences, but I think what unites us is that grief.
Absolutely.
What did you think about the advisability of taking over the Gardiner Expressway at that time?
Look, I think it was an expression of people who were pushed to the ends of what they could do. We had a very brutal end to the Civil War. The numbers are 100,000 just in the last few months. People were dying by the thousands. I know of friends and extended friends whose entire families perished. And yet you had a multilateral sort of international community that wasn't paying any heed to that. And people just wanted to make sure that they were heard. Mind you, Steve, I have my own difference of opinion with the kinds of activism that went with that. But at the end of the day, I still remember working in the Ontario government, and people would come, people who are not of Tamil heritage, and ask me, so what's going on? At that point, it didn't matter what my differences was. I was there to tell the Tamil story to the best of my abilities, right? And so I knew I had to do my research. I knew I had to understand what the activists were trying to say, even though I don't agree with them
I hear
sometimes.
you. You know that, of course, there's always a risk when you take over a major thoroughfare like that
Yes.
people are going to be more concerned about their own particular...
And it happened on Mother's Day, right? I think that was one of the biggest, I think, issues that people had. That was on Mother's Day, and all of that is, understandable. But I think this was the expression of people who had no other choice but to stage this kind of this method of engagement.
Okay, let's just focus in our remaining moments here on. I want to start with you because you were there. You started your life there. You started your life there. You didn't. You started your life here.
Yes.
What kind of I don't know if you'd call it a call to home or a call to go home or get in touch with your roots, whatever you want to call it. How have you expressed that?
Yes, so I actually went back home twice. So the first time
And you
I
say
went,
home.
Yes, I do now. Yeah, but it wasn't always like that. So I went back home 2005, and
You're
that
born
was.
in Etobicoke. Why do you say go home?
You see, I say go home, but I didn't say that I identified as Sri Lankan. And to me, when I went back home, I really felt the home and the belonging when I went to the Tamil parts of Sri Lanka, which is why I say Canadian Tamil. Right? So the Tamil parts are really the north and the east. Both my parents were born and raised in the north. I didn't feel the sense of belonging when I wasn't there. No longer I can't speak the language anymore. My parents can't speak the language anymore. So, I say back home, when I say back home, I mean when I went back home to the north, So I did go during the ceasefire time, which was a bit of an interesting time around 2005.
Tell me about that. You had some Tamil Tiger encounters of some kind, did you not?
Yeah, so, we traveled from Colombo, which is the capital of the country, and we had to travel up north, and we did take take a coach bus. And during that time, every hour or two, there will be checkpoints where, everyone gets off the bus, they check your body, and they check your passports and stuff like that. So it was just my brother and I. We were fairly young at that time, and my mom. My dad couldn't make it. And, they see a Canadian passport, and then they'll have some more questions. Why are you returning? Where are you going? And stuff like that.
So these were Tamil tigers who were frisking you.
Yeah, and, in a place that I am openly calling my homeland, to have something like that is a bit of a confusing thing for me at that point in my life, still trying to connect with Tamil identity.
Right. Now, how about you? You left very young.
I did.
Have you gone back?
I have. I actually went back in 2004 during the ceasefire time, around the time Roshani went, and I actually stayed in sort of like the Tamil Tiger stronghold, and I did some volunteer work. And I think that experience fundamentally shifted my whole notion around identity. So since like the end of the war, I've gone back almost every single year, and I run a small nonprofit where we are trying to send second generation Tamil-speaking Canadians back home.
Is this Conduit?
It is Conduit, yes.
So this is COMDU.
Yes.
.it.
Yes, it's a portmanteau of community conduit, and it's not unlike other diaspora models that are out there in terms of just getting people to go back and reconnect with their roots and heritage. But what we also want to do is to have young people go back with a very critical eye on what's going on back home in the North and East, because I think there are still a lot of issues, Steve, that persist, even though the armed conflict may have ended. And we want young people of Tamil heritage in Canada to make sure that they go back and they talk to people on the ground, understand what's going on, and then think about how they can intervene in very sort of critical, sustainable, co-created ways with vulnerable communities on the ground.
Now, as we've established, you left almost 5 decades ago.
Correct.
Have you returned?
Yes, I have gone back a few times, not often, but yes.
How come?
Why do I go back?
Yeah.
I have family there.
So it's to go back to see them?
Yes, well, initially, before '83, we would go back because, my family was still involved in the political side. But after '83, it's been to visit family.
Has your grandfather's work been transported over here in some ways?
Yes.
How so?
Actually, so we are donating his papers and my father's papers to the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. There's a Tamil chair being set up, and there's been donations by a number of Tamil philanthropists. And so his papers, they're being archived at the moment. I didn't know the archival process was so complex, but some of the information that's coming out is very interesting. For example, in the 50s, all these Tamil people would write to him about how they've been fired from jobs and so on because they were Tamil. And he would write back to every single one of them, right? He was a lawyer, offering them support and so on. So you begin to get a better picture of our history. And it's important to have written documentation, as we know.
When you go back, and I can say go back in your case because you actually started there.
Right.
Does it feel like home for you?
No, it's actually a very different place from the kind of place I left. It's more commercial. It looks different, more commercialized. The environment's different. Right now, you have a lot of NGOs there. So it is a different place from what I left.
We got about a minute and a half to go here, so let me get you on this, and we'll see how many we can get, how many responses we can get here. What's your hope for Tamils and Tamil Canadians as we look at during this important month?
What a question to end on, Steve, and just a minute left. I think it's very important that Canadians, and I think including elected officials and political parties, understand that the dynamic in the community is shifting. I'm a happy romantic, Steve, and I think there is a renaissance happening within the diaspora community in Canada. The old ways of organizing within the community, the old ways of engaging in politics and civic engagement are changing, and they're being led from the ground by young people again, as they always do in generational shifts. And I think elected officials would be well served to understand that retail politics may not work as effectively for Tamil votes in Canada anymore.
What does that mean?
Well, I think there's a sense of like what I call the saris and samosa politics, right? You come in, you say your vanakkams and Tamil Heritage Month celebrations. I think young Tamil Canadians are going to ask very serious policy questions next time around.
Yeah.
How about it?
Yeah, I would say as a Tamil Canadian, being that hyphenated version is very important. So, Tamil identity is rooted in human rights, it's rooted in colonialism, it's rooted in, oppressive systems and stuff like that. But now that we have become settlers of Canada, we need to start contextualizing that and understanding the role that we might be playing in oppression, and being able to understand things like anti-Black racism and anti-colonialism and Indigenous rights and stuff. So it's very important that we continue to fight for our rights, but also work together with other communities and create solidarity and be relatable in that way. And I think that's something that's very important as being a Tamil Canadian.
That's a nice place to leave this. I want to thank all of you for coming into TVO tonight and sharing your views during this important month on our calendar.
Thank you for having
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.